Maneva na sema PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV de osia dem yopo.
In the previous administration, Abra na NDC ewo opposition no. Na okujeto ablakwa e de expose bi about the former president Nana Adudankwa Akufo-Addo ebetuda regarding ne travels, ne presidential jet, ene afen so no e car Ghana yebo Abra Nana Adudankwa Akufo-Addo president. Na President John Dramani Mahama president no. Or say what na fie asua adie. Wa hu adie NPP ya amboa oh my God, and no, he's not going to repeat such mistakes. Now there is some controversy surrounding President John Dramani Mahama wo you say Ninuya Ibrahim Mahama, the private jet for travels and NPP a true propaganda say Ibrahim Mahama is benefiting and NASA is going to benefit from President John Dramani Mahama the usage of the private jet. Na Felix Ofosu government spokesperson Abe Kasa or Kasa, it more or less like President John Dramani Mahama and all Kasa. Wabe Cheche and Semu Nientia. There are other options. Name President John Dramani Mahama Akofa Ibrahim Mahama private jet. And I say Nientia President John Dramani Mahama Akofo Ibrahim Mahama jet. Name one call anchor rented jet like former president Nana Adudankwa Akufo-Addo in the previous administration. Felix Ofosu said, this is not about comfort. It is about safety. It is about reliability. Okay, and some from details we na me pesa obeka me ho na yakotie kwan ya Felix Ofosu ensemu PENDREAM TV. Subscribe to the channel, bell the notification, na share ma afoforo ensa enkabi. Comment section or constructively nowadays we're doing Yenti Felix Ofosu Kwache.
Why is President Mahama using a private jet for his travels?
Oh, I think
the presidential.
I think I've had an opportunity to speak to you on your news bulletin, Eyewitness News, and other platforms on CTTV to explain this matter. Let me indicate that President Mahama has no difficulty using any asset of the state to the extent that those who manage it give it the all clear. In his previous guise as president, in 2014, there was an instance where we went to France for a state visit. So we went with the presidential jet. But at the same time, it was due for servicing, so it had to be left in France for servicing. Then we had to leave France and go to Germany for another leg of the state visit. The presidential jet was not available. President Mahama flew commercial on Lufthansa from France to Germany. Now, between Germany and Ghana, the plane that Lufthansa used to operate had only economy seats. It didn't have business class seats. The president sat in one of those economy seats and came to Ghana as president of the republic. This was in 2014. So he has no difficulty using what the state has or what is available at any particular point in time. That's the first point. The second point is that when he became president in January 2025, one of the first things he did was seek to inquire about the state of the presidential aircraft. So he asked the communication squadron to furnish him with an update on the state of the aircraft. They said it was in good health or good condition. So indeed, the president sat in that plane and went to Tanzania, Kenya, and Angola. I was on those trips, so I sat in the plane. This must have been February 2025. Upon return, sometime in March, the plane was due for servicing. It went to France for servicing, and they detected numerous faults. So it stayed there for 8 long months and came in towards the latter part of last year. Now, the Ghana Air Force, for a long time, has had a problem with a deficit in aircraft, modern aircraft. What they have, many of them have broken down, are not functional. And then recently we lost the helicopter that carried some prominent Ghanaian officials. So subsequent to that, the Air Force has made it known to government that the aircraft they have currently are not in the best of shapes. In the specific instance of the presidential aircraft, they have said that it is an aging aircraft and it breaks down frequently. So it poses difficulties for safety and reliability. And then it undermines operational efficiency. Also, it is too costly to operate. When you need it, it will not be available. Then you need to make alternative arrangements, sometimes very, very costly to the state. And then there are safety concerns. So they recommend the purchase of a new aircraft amongst other aircraft for the use of the Air Force. Indeed, they've brought this to cabinet. I have sat in cabinet and I have witnessed the proceedings. Cabinet approved it. It was taken to Parliament. Parliament has approved it. So the process has begun to bring in the new aircraft. About 3 weeks ago or so, the first of the aircraft came, the helicopter came. 3 more are supposed to come. By the end of this year, sometime in November, we expect the new presidential aircraft to come. But in between the time that...
So currently, our presidential jet is more functional.
The thing is that they will not recommend its use for the president.
Is it still in Ghana?
It's in Ghana. It's been back in Ghana for some time. But they will not recommend it for the president because of the safety concerns and its unreliability. You cannot trust that it will take you to the place and bring you back in one piece.
So the president will not fly it again anymore?
Again, based on the recommendation of the Air Force, it is not in a state for the president to fly. Now, that then leaves 2 alternatives.
No, but I just want to know what. So
yes, they say that
if it's not working,
not that it is not working, but it cannot meet the needs.
It's not trusted.
It cannot meet the needs of presidential
travel. You also
travel.
said that so the new presidential jet would come by the end of this
November.
year.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the timeline that we're given here.
Now, when the president came into office, there are times in this recent time, there are times he has flown commercially.
True. In fact, I was coming to that.
So go ahead.
So yes, there are times when he's flown commercially, and the prelude I gave you relating to what he has done in the past aspect was to emphasize the point that for the president, it's not about comfort or anything. It's just about reliability and safety. It's not about comfort because, as I told you, he has sat in an economic class plane and come to Ghana without any difficulty as president.
As sitting president.
As sitting president. Yes, I was on that flight as well. In fact, in that instance, he was even with the first lady because it was an official visit to a country. So he has no difficulty. And indeed, on many occasions, he has flown commercial in his recent guise as president of Ghana. And indeed, I recall that there was a time that he went to China through Dubai. And people raised concern about the inconvenience of the delay and layover and all that because he flew commercial. So he has done that. But it's not always practical to go commercial because of the routes and the time frame within which the travel needs to be carried out. Sometimes too, there are several hops on the trip. So we move from one country to the other. And so it is not very convenient, especially when connecting flights are difficult to get because of the arrangements that may exist at the time. So the other option would be to rent expensive aircrafts. Now, this is a president who is committed to doing his best to reduce government expenditure as much as possible, especially relating to expenditure on the executive. So you recall that since he's been in government, he's named fewer ministers than his predecessors. Now he has 58 ministers, even though he promised to have 60 ministers because of the unfortunate loss of 2 of his ministers. He has 58 now. That compares to 123 around the same time in 2018 when President Ofosu was there. If you look at the list of presidential staff, the president has slashed it considerably. Indeed, by 2022, President Ofosu had 361 presidential staff, in other presidential staffers, aides, and other categories of political appointees in the Jubilee House. Indeed, by the time they were leaving, they had 331. The president has slashed that number by about 100 or so. And again, that results in significant cost savings for the citizens of Ghana. Look at fuel, for instance. When I first came here, I was entitled to fuel, so I was getting fuel every week. The president said no, he could no longer countenance that, so he cancelled it. So as I speak to you, myself and my colleagues who work here buy our own fuel every week. We don't take fuel anymore from the government. DSTV, he has cut that too, just to make savings. Independence celebrations. When he came into power, he noticed that the last celebration before he came to power cost about 15 million Ghana cedis. If we were to hold it at the Independence Square because of its size, it will cost about 20 million Ghana cedis. He says no, we can hold it at the forecourt. We have a fairly large forecourt here. So he slashed the budget, and now it's about 1.4 million Ghana cedis, 1.5 million Ghana cedis, and that has been the budget for the 2 independence celebrations that have been held here. So I have recounted you to show you that there is a man who is generally committed to cutting costs. So he says that no, rather than go and rent expensive aircraft, and President Ofosu was doing so at $18,000 an hour, and it generated significant public concern So the president said, no, rather than go and rent an aircraft and pay $18,000 an hour. So sometimes a trip can last, depending on where you are going and how your movement pans out, it can last about 36 hours. With the plane, so it's around $540,000.
Currently?
Yes, if that's the going rate, if you have an aircraft of the sort that President Akufo-Addo was renting, and you do a trip that keeps the aircraft in your custody for 36 hours, that is $540,000. That is huge. So the president says no. Fortuitously, my brother has an aircraft. Indeed, when he was in opposition, the old aircraft that his brother had, he used it both for internal and external trips. So he says that, look, my brother has an aircraft. So rather than burden the people of Ghana with this amount of money, why don't I just fuel it and bear some auxiliary costs, which is far lower than what I would have paid if I rented, because I cannot use commercial aircraft at a particular moment. This is a consideration that has gone into the use of his brother's aircraft and nothing more. So it is well intentioned and intended to beat down the cost as much as possible. But as we have had cause to indicate, this is a temporary arrangement which should have beat by the close of this year, because we will have a presidential jet which then can take care of these needs. And this has been selected by the Air Force itself, so it will meet their requirements for operational efficiency and all the considerations that go into
pound for pound. If we were going, so there's a must at a point to go private jet, and that's why the president is doing that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Pound for pound, if we had gone for a private jet from France or wherever we went to rent it versus using Jata, which is owned by Ibrahim Mahama, what are we saving? How much are we saving?
First of all, if he uses his brother's jet, he does not pay to rent it.
Okay.
So when you rent it,
so we are not renting.
So we are not paying 18,000. Then you need to fuel it. So if you rent, you pay for rent, you need to fuel.
Okay.
Then you take off incidental costs like landing fees and all the other charges that come with it.
Okay.
So by not renting, you eliminate the rent. And I told that if you rent the thing for 36 hours, that's $540,000.
Okay.
Plus the fuel and other costs that you pay. So we bear the other costs, but which is rental. So it saves you significant resources.
So currently, if the president goes to Taiwan and goes with Jata aircraft and spends 5 days, we will still not pay anything.
You will not pay anything
as a rent.
Absolutely, you won't pay for rental. What you pay for is fuel.
Why would Ibrahim Mahama, a private businessman, give us his jet to be using for free?
Because it is his brother.
That is all there
That
is.
That's the only
there are no hidden.
First of all, I've heard people say, "Oh, he is likely to benefit." First, does your brother need to give you something for you to do something to help him in life?
Yes, if the president is doing it for the state and the state has money to pay, the president should pay. But
no,
if the brother was in opposition,
the president does not believe that the state should pay for that kind of expense. If he had cheaper alternatives, he would go for it. But the cheapest at the moment, given the circumstances where he is going and the need he will have for the aircraft, is his brother's arrangement. But the point I'm making is that Ibrahim Mahama does not need to give his aircraft to President Mahama for him to get any favor if there was anything like that. So the argument that this is being done in exchange for some consideration or some favor is completely untenable.
So we should be celebrating Ibrahim Mahama for giving
he's done a good job in my view for sacrificing like that for the state.
So only thing we do is fuel it.
That's all. That's what there is.
Maybe buy breakfast for the pilot and all those people.
Of course, so there are incidental charges. That's how I've gone. But that's all that we do. He doesn't rent it.
And at the end
mind you, there was one instance where the ruler of Dubai had to bring him an aircraft.
Yes, I saw that
exactly.
one too.
Indeed, if the president had access to an aircraft, we will not. And in that instance, he had to go to Zambia. So the time limit was so short that it was not going to be practical to go commercial. So the ruler of Dubai offered the aircraft just as one of the ways to ensure that he is able to attend.
By the end of next year, if an audit is done, we are not going to come and
hear that. First of all,
it
is not a secret. You see, the cost for the president's travel is contained in the budget. You recall that there was a time when, by the third quarter of a certain year, President Akufo-Addo had incurred 68 million Ghana cedis in travel costs. So it's part of the budget estimates that are done. So there's nothing really to hide.
So for now, until anything significant happens, we are not going to rent a private jet outside Ghana. We'll use Ibrahim Mahama's jet for free.
Well, the president believes that we should go for the cheapest option. And he has no difficulty going commercial if the circumstance of the travel dictates so.
Okay.
But if there's an option to use an aircraft which lessens the burden on the taxpayer. And let me stress that that is the only consideration in this. Because as president, he can dip his hands in the coffers and rent an aircraft, a very comfortable one that suits whatever taste you think that the president should have. But he hasn't done that. And the only reason why is to save costs. So it is well intentioned. It is not intended in any way, shape, or form to give the president any extraordinary comfort. Not at all.
Let's pretend Jata is not even there. Let's pretend we are using a private jet, whether we are paying for it or not. There is a need and a necessity for us to use a private jet.
Yes.
Akufo-Addo found that need and necessity. You critiqued him. You
Because
said he was
first of all,
bathing in the air and all of that.
No, we are not the ones who said that. It was Dominic who said that. So we must get that fact correct. The second point is that at the height of economic disaster, where Ghanaians were going through a lot of pain and anguish because of the sheer effect of the economic crisis, which President Akufo-Addo has superintended. There are certain things that you should not do as a leader. The economy has significantly improved, but you find that President Mahama is not renting aircraft. But here was a leader who was superintending a country that was going through a lot of suffering and pain. Yet he went for top of the range rentals to $18,000.
Yeah, but the fact that the country was, it doesn't mean that the security and safety of the president ought to be.
Of course, there are jets. Of course, the security of the president is paramount. But so is the security of the citizens.
So renting a jet at the time was not. So renting a jet at the time was not wrong.
No. First of all, it was what he went for. There were instances where the presidential jet was available. After that, when the presidential jet was available, President Mahama used it. There was an instance where the presidential jet was given to President Oponwia to use, and the President Akufo-Addo rented a private jet.
Diplomatic reasons.
So why?
International relations matters.
No, you have your aircraft. You have your aircraft.
Yes.
You see, your country is going through economic difficulty.
Yes. We're going
and
through,
we're going through. And you give your aircraft to another head of state, then you go and rent. Why? Are you obliged if you cannot afford it?
We're going
to extend that courtesy to another head of state?
We're going through economic difficulties. Kwame Nkrumah gave 10 million to Guinea. Those
who feel like Kwame Nkrumah can do so, but it cannot become a justification for doing what happened at President Akufo-Addo. Let us not. You see, I've heard people talk about apologies. The point is that citizens are right to take issue with leaders when they do things that they think are wrong. So anybody who criticized President Akufo-Addo was within his rights to do so.
If he had gone for a lesser priced jet at the time, you wouldn't have a problem.
Perhaps people would have understood. That's the president.
So your difficulty is that you agree that he should have rented, absolutely. But it shouldn't have been at that cost.
That a president must travel in safety and relative comfort. It's not in dispute. I don't think that the ordinary Ghanaian would have a difficulty with that. But if you are living like an Arabian king at a time when people are suffering from economic collapse arising out of your own mismanagement. For instance, one of the things that he said, which was mind-boggling, is that at the height of all the economic difficulty, his biggest priority was building a cathedral. You don't want to conduct yourself like that as a leader. You are bound to come under criticism.
Talking about flying.
Yes.
If you fly to the east, you're going all the way, you continue and land in Iran. There's problem there. Iran is being attacked by Russia, by US and Israel. As a result, we are seeing challenges with fuel. NPP people are saying that the stone that you threw at them when they complain about Russia-Ukraine war, that same stone will now be used to hit you if you ever complain about the cost of fuel.
You see, the NPP behaves as if they are the only ones who have a right to speak. You see, it is never going to be a monologue in this country. It will always be a dialogue, which means that we too will begin with a shout. You see, so the people of Ghana are very reasonable people. You see, they understand the issues. The same people who have changed governments on 4 occasions are not to be trifled with. So you can't just assume that you will say anything and get away with it without scrutiny. The fact is this. By the time the Russia-Ukrainian war broke out, the NPP had destroyed the economy. Way back in 2020, because of their mismanagement, the reckless way in which they mismanaged our finances, by the end of 2020, they had incurred an unprecedented deficit of 15%. So our debt began to rise, our currency began to fall, inflation began to rise. When the Russian-Ukrainian war broke out in February 24th, 2022, inflation was 13.7% in the preceding month. In February, it went to 15.7%. What is inflation today? The cedi had depreciated. Today, the cedi has appreciated. Our public debt has reduced. At the time, the public debt had gone up. Other metrics were in disarray. Indeed, they were spending 92% of tax revenue to service our public debt. Today, the situation is significantly different. You understand me? So, any shock was going to be exacerbated by underlying economic weakness. That was where the problem was.
What's your point? That we have
known since 2015 that we have a deregulated petroleum environment. So, any of the three factors that contribute to pricing, i.e. the price of the commodity on the world markets, the exchange rates, and inflation, can impact prices. We know it. That is how come once in a while there are marginal increases and then there are decreases, and you see that people don't really complain because they know that. And since that policy was implemented, it has resolved the long-standing problem preceding that of constant debt in the sector, which could lead to shortages at some point and lead to huge increases at some other point. So by and large, we had overcome that problem with that automatic adjustment formula. So if an increase in the world market price occurs and the economic fundamentals are stable, the increases that will occur will not be as much as if your economy is on the verge of collapse like happened under the NPP. So mind you that around that time, fuel prices went as high as 23 cedis for diesel and 17 cedis for petrol. Today, that is not the case. The reason being that the cedi has appreciated, it has been stable, and the inflation is very low.
Are you saying we are better prepared now and that we shouldn't expect to be hit hard?
First of all, it depends on what has happened. If the situation exceeds normal limits, it will not be surprising to see a certain level of impact. But that impact is cushioned by better economic fundamentals. You understand me? So those who think that it is an opportunity for the NPP to
there's a shortage of fuel, I'm not sure your fundamentals.
First of all, there will be no shortage of fuel. Why would there be a shortage of fuel?
If 20% of global fuel is affected, that has a ripple effect.
But that would not be, nobody would fault the government of Ghana for that. Who would do that?
So why were we faulting the government
because
of Ghana?
They had destroyed, you are not listening to me, Umaru.
I'm listening to you.
They had destroyed the economy.
Yes, but I'm saying that.
Do you know what a 15%, do you know what a 15% deficit means?
My question is, if 20% of fuel is shut down now, it will affect us whether we like it or not.
Yes, that is true.
If Ukraine is attacked and grain exports becomes a problem, we would be affected, whether we like it or not. And that's not our doing.
That is only one.
So whether our fundamentals were correct or
grain
not.
export, how did that affect Ghana really? Or grain import?
No, I'm just saying that's one of many things that Ukraine was doing.
So you need to notice the difference.
Yes.
If you are better prepared, the impact is limited. If you are not prepared, the impact is deepened. That's all that happened.
But that is to suggest that we shouldn't expect bad things to happen to us, regardless of what's happening in the
to the extent that the situation remains what it is, and it does not lead to an escalation, the impact will be softer. But everybody will know that it is because of this unforeseen circumstance. But if your house is in disarray, the slightest twitch in external factors affects you deeply, like it did under the NPP. That's all that there is to it.
What's our position on the war? Some of our soldiers have been attacked. Of course, they were not there taking part in the war. But what are we supposed to do?
I think we have demanded an urgent response from the United Nations, and we have demanded an immediate investigation into the matter to ascertain the causes, who did what, so that appropriate responses can be fashioned out. Indeed, a few days ago, I saw that the UN Secretary General had visited one of the soldiers who were affected. It is a condemnable action.
But are we taking sides as a government on whether...
No, as far as we know, we have called for dialogue. Only yesterday at the Iftar event, President Obama called for dialogue and requested for cessation of hostilities so that life can return to normalcy. Okay. Whatever problems that may have triggered it should not be beyond resolution if we use dialogue.
Yes. Imagine that 500,000 people applied for vacancies for just 5,000. And I've maintained that they may not necessarily be interested in protecting our country or defense. They are looking for jobs. I mean, that is the bottom line. It is a big issue that 500,000 people are looking for placement. We saw the same thing with the armed forces. How is the government dealing with this matter now that you are saying 495,000 have to go home?
Well, let me clarify that it was not 500,000 people who applied. There were 506,000 applications. But the unique individuals who applied were much smaller. I think it was around 280,000 or so.
I think 380. The minister for
said 280,000 actually. The unique individuals who applied. So
no, the minister said.
Well, I think that there's been a subsequent review. I've not heard the minister.
So it's less than 300,000.
What I'm aware of is less than 300,000. That's around 280,000.
Very well.
But that is still a very large number. It's still a large number. There's no dispute about it. The point is that we have known for some time that unemployment is a major problem in this country. Indeed, it was one of the reasons why we campaigned vigorously to take over the reins of power and do something to address it. Since the incident happened, President Mama has summoned the minister, as you noted yesterday. So the minister has given him a full briefing in which he has explained clearly what the issues are. I think that the only problem is that there was an oversubscription. Subscription far outstripped available places. And the minister indicated that 5,000 people were going to be enlisted out of the lot that had applied. Clearly, it was small. So it then meant that there were many people who may even qualify but would be displaced. They would not find the place they are looking for. So it is bound and natural. It is bound to generate some disappointment and disenchantment. It is natural. We appreciate that as a government. So an immediate step is to review the process and ensure that to the extent that we can, as many people as possible are given the opportunity to enlist. So the president directed that instead of the anticipated 20,000 recruitments over 4 years, that started from 2025, it should be 40,000, so roughly 10,000 a year. And that is precisely what is being. So it is intended to open up the system a bit and allow more opportunity. But beyond that, there's a need to do more to address the issue of unemployment. And
but on the expansion, so the Minister for the Interior made us know that our economy could not support any higher number. Now that the President has given this directive, where's the money going to come from?
So you just need to adjust. It simply means that you look at your finance and readjust to ensure that you have. So the Finance Minister will give additional clearance.
But that's like 100%.
Yes, to bring on board additional number. It's necessary. So like I said, what you need to do is to readjust your finances to be able to meet that particular.
Are you not trying to be, I'm not going to use the word populist, but
no.
trying to...
No, as a government must be responsive to the concerns of the citizens. So if there's a concern that opportunities are too small and that the band is too narrow, and you can do something about it, adjust it slightly to accommodate more people. Oh well, good. The truth also is that the armed force actually needs the numbers.
Yeah, but the difficulty is that
the security agencies need the numbers. It's not like...
But if you bring them, you risk seeing them picketing because their salaries have not been paid. Because the capacity of the economy...
So before this commitment was made, we found out whether we have capacity to pay and whether the finance minister was in a position to grant clearance. And he says, yes, he can.
Sustainable.
So it is absolutely sustainable. And things will be done to ensure that they do not meet that difficulty.
So you're going to increase the intake for up to 40,000 over the next 4 years?
Starting from 2025, yes.
So now let's talk about...
So mind you, the recruitment that has been done now, it started in 2025. The process has, lapsed into 2026.
So we'll increase the one for last year from 5,000 to 10,000. And we'll do for this year and then the next 2 years.
Absolutely.
So that we get like 40,000 for the next, instead of 20,000.
Yes.
That's very fair. If you say that the economy can support, it's great. But
it was not done on a whim.
Okay,
but it's done after careful consideration.
But it still means that the youth unemployment is a big issue. Absolutely. We have the YEA, which we created to deal with that. And I think NIP also does something around that area. And yet we are having this backlog of unemployment.
Yes, indeed.
So what's the government's plan?
Government appreciates that. And indeed, one of the concerns expressed by the President at the meeting with the Interior Minister and the heads of the security agencies was that. So there are several other strategies that have been employed. You've spoken about YEA. We've expanded it, so more people have gotten in. There's a Jumeria. Jumeria really focuses on training entrepreneurs to own their own business so that they can employ their colleagues. There's a national apprenticeship program which targets eventually to bring on board 100,000 youth every year in an apprenticeship to hone their skills so that they can on their own setup.
Is that like the NAPCO that the NPP?
No, it's not a NAPCO. This is a national apprenticeship program. In other words, so...
But this was National Builders Corps, Nation Builders Corps.
There were people who were doing nothing basically and were being given. In fact, they couldn't even pay them.
Yeah,
in the end, they had to let them go.
The first year they paid them,
but subsequently, you and I know exactly what happened. If a program is only sustainable for just 1 year, they know that it was no program at all. But the point I'm making is that this is apprenticeship. It is not Nation Builders Corps. It is not an empty slogan. Indeed, what happens is that if you train somebody to become a seamstress or a welder or a bricklayer, a tiler, a steel bender, or any other kind of artisan, you have given him employment. So government does not need to employ them again, unless of course they are needed for public sector jobs. Okay. You understand me? So you set them up permanently.
So you are not employing, you are training.
They are being trained and being equipped.
Okay.
To indeed last year 10,000 people got the opportunity. Under 10,000 will get the opportunity this year. But subsequently we intend to expand it to 100,000 a year. There's the Women's Development Bank, which
is taking forever to come.
No, it's not. Indeed, I had a briefing on it yesterday, and they are very, very far advanced. Indeed, we expect that after Easter, there will be a major briefing on it. So we will update Ghanaians on where.
Will the bank be established after Easter?
No, I didn't say it will be established, but my indication is that it will be established in the coming months. But they need to update Ghanaians.
You said major briefing. We don't want briefing.
No. But if you see,
it's a priority of priorities for you.
No. The thing is that people must know what is happening. The Bible itself says that you don't light a torch and put it under a table. So you must put it on a lamppost so that it shines a light onto the path.
So you come and shine a light on the
so people must know.
Women's bank.
There are those who say, "Oh, it's collapsed. It's not going to happen." So you need to know where they are. And I'm telling you that they've gone very far. They will engage. They will explain where they are. And they know exactly what they are doing and what it entails, and how it's going to be rolled out. But certainly this year,
they have given assurance that it will be done.
Certainly this year is going to be. In fact, it should be in the coming months. Actually,
end of year, mid-year.
Oh, it should be. It should not. It should be earlier than end of year.
What about the chicken? The chicken thing.
Yeah, that is ongoing.
I don't want to go up, but my tree is not good, so I can't.
Well, it's called a so the intention is to distribute 3 million beds to various communities to ensure that it's a complementary effort towards improving poultry. Indeed, the Ministry of Agri has a plan to achieve self-sufficiency in poultry production in the next few years. So that is aimed at augmenting efforts that exist through regular poultry production. So this one targets domestic rearing of these birds.
Okay.
So they are not giving day-old chicks. They are giving birds that are slightly older, who are robust enough to withstand the environments within which
because
they 3 million birds.
Because of your history with guinea fowls and Saga, how well are you executing
There's no
this?
nexus. There's no nexus between.
So that another scandal doesn't come.
There's no nexus.
Your chickens.
It does not even arise because there's no nexus between the two. That is just still propaganda that we must do away with.
Talking of propaganda, your critics say that you promised to do one job, 3 people. That should be able to solve our unemployment problem. Why don't you create 24 in all the places, Jubilee House, Ministry, everywhere, and employ thrice the number?
Again, we need to separate serious discourse from propaganda and jest. You know, governance is not about jest. So people out there engaging in jest are not being fair to the facts. We promised that we were going to ensure that this economy runs 24 hours. It is not a promise made on a whim. It is not a slogan. It is a detailed program intended to transform our economy, expand it, and create opportunities for job creation. So we need to lay down the proper structures. So there's a very serious-minded individual who is responsible for coordinating this. And he's done a lot of work that very soon will roll out. Indeed, he has been given a budget to roll out the program this year.
Okay.
They need to set up properly so that it stands the test of time because it's a multi-sectorial activity. And therefore, you need to bring on board various stakeholders within the public sector and then predominantly in the private sector, because it's essentially a private sector activity. There's only so much that government can do. And they've done a lot of work. And so very soon they'll roll out. And
Minister,
we'll know exactly where they are.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. I wish you all the best. That's Felix Ofosu. He has a baby face. He's not a baby. I'm younger than him. He's Minister of State in charge of Government Communication. He has been my guest on Face to Face. We'll be back next week. Please stay with us. Thank you.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.